This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Hello and welcome to The Good Books. I'm Blake Chastain. This week I have a great interview with Josiah Hesse to share. Josiah was a guest on Exvangelical way back in 2018, and in this episode we talk about his latest book, On Fire for God. Josiah passed through Chicago while on his book tour, and I met up with him in his hotel room to talk all about the book. On-site interviews like this are totally new realm for me, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I'm just getting started on YouTube after years in the podcast mines, so if you're listening to or watching this over there, please be sure to subscribe and head on over to blakechastain.com to see the rest of what I'm up to. One final note, I'll be appearing alongside Josiah, Maddie Jo Cowsert, and BK O'Connor at Urbane Arts Club in Brooklyn in just over a month on Sunday, March 8th for an event called From Pews to Prose. I'm really looking forward to that, and you can find a link to that free event in the show notes. All right, let's get into it. For Josiah here. My guest today is Josiah Hesse. Josiah is a journalist, novelist, author, and most recently, a memoirist. His prior books include the Carnality series of novels and the nonfiction book Runner's High. And his new book is called On Fire for God, Fear, Poverty, Shame, and the Making of the Christian Right. Josiah, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for meeting with me. We're meeting in Chicago, and we're recording in your lovely hotel room while you're on your book tour for On Fire for God. And you were a prior guest when I was much more of a baby podcaster, when I barely knew what I was doing.
That was here in Chicago, right?
That's right, yeah. I was at a bookshop in, I believe, Logan Square, which was just a blast. Mm-hmm. Now I'm venturing into video, so we always just happen to meet and have these conversations right as I'm learning some new skills, so I hope this works out. But I really loved your book, On Fire for God, and it's a generational story, it's an economic story, it's a Midwestern story, as well as this story of art and self-discovery. But I actually want to start with the generational aspect of things in our conversation. One of the things that I really admire about memoirs is how open they are, just by nature of the genre. And often in order to tell your story, you also tell the story of your parents. And you are very open about your parents' struggles, but you don't start there. You actually start with your grandparents. Why was it important to start with their, and to tell a bit about their history?
Well, yeah, really, like you just articulated, it did just keep expanding the scope of the book, because initially it was just going to be my story, and talking about a lot of isolation and mental health issues that I had as a kid, and I flunked out of school. It was just very difficult several years, but then I was like, well, I want to explain why my parents, raised me that way, or how to explain some of their shortcomings. And I was like, well, really, to get into their marriage and who they are as people, I need to show them as teenagers and as children, and show what kind of environment they grew up in. And then I was like, well, to explain that, I really need to keep going. And then also seeing how the beats of history kept repeating, mm-hmm. and there was so much more I wanted to get into than just the Moral Majority and the Left Behind books of my generation. I wanted to show how similar these things were to the Jesus movement of the 70s, or the Billy Graham Crusades of the 60s, or, Billy Sunday and the KKK in the 20s. And then I thought, like, well, I do have this vehicle of my hometown and my family and the Music Man, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute.
Yeah.
But to kind of illustrate alongside of these historical moments, what it looks like on the ground for real people and families. And I know I could have just, kept going back and back further,
Sure.
you do so well in Evangelical and Beyond, looking at like George Whitefield and the First Great Awakening. But at some point, you gotta put it.
Yeah, you gotta dial in somewhere. As you mentioned, like you come from a place that has, had to put its mark on the popular culture as far as like through the Music Man. Your hometown was the basis of the Music Man, and actually that resonated with me personally, just because I'm from a small town. I'm from Crawfordsville, Indiana, and our claim to fame is that Ben-Hur was written there.
Oh, fun.
So like when we finally moved into town, I was like 3 blocks from the General Lew Wallace study, and things like that. But at the same time, the other thing that is like that is a bit of faded glory, right? It's something that your town was known for, and then, as is the case in a lot of Midwestern small towns, those glory days are in the past. But talk about that and about how Mason City and the overall area like formed you and your family.
In many ways, and it was something I really had to dig in to articulate because, you could probably relate as a Midwesterner. If you're from the South, if you're from like New Orleans or you're from New York or you're from Portland, you feel like you're from a very specific place and has a certain identity with it. Whether or not that's flawed or accurate or not, it is still something that puts you in a certain context. But the Midwest often doesn't have a lot to give it any kind of cultural identity, particularly in Iowa. People think of maybe Field of Dreams, the Kevin Costner movie. They think corn, they think flyover state. And it's understandable because we didn't really form an identity the way a lot of other places in America did. It's almost as if the Midwest is a colony of the East Coast, and was that way like in banking and industry for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But after the farming collapse of the 1980s, so many family farms disappeared and became these big corporate agriculture industries. And there was a way of life that goes back centuries to Germany and Norway in the case of my family. And so we just kind of grew up not really knowing who we were or what there was for us to inherit. My mother's family lost their farm, right before I was born. And a lot of my friends grew up on farms that just disappeared. So like when we came of age, there was no industry for us to fall into. There was nothing for us to inherit. And, you cling to whatever you can in these small towns with the industries drying up. So in Mason City, I was the Music Man, which still seems bizarre to me that everywhere you go in Mason City, you're reminded of the Music Man at every turn.
Really?
Like it's murals everywhere. The Hardys is a Music Man museum. Is Meredith Willson's childhood home is a museum. But it's a story of people being swindled by this traveling con man. It's really about like the gullibility of the people of this town. Meredith Willson, who wrote it, is from Mason City. He changed the name to River City because he was sure that like he'd never be welcomed home again after this came out. But no, they love it. And I don't think they really see the satirical elements of it. There's a parade every year that's all marching bands through Mason City. There's sculptures everywhere. And right next door in Clear Lake, which is the other town I grew up in, it's where Buddy Holly and Richie Valens played their last show and died in a bean field just north of town, coming out of our airport.
Died.
Yeah, and it's the same thing over there. Like Buddy Holly is everywhere. His face is like the great leader in North Korea. Like it's in every home, every business, everywhere. And I'm like, we didn't give the world Buddy Holly, like Lubbock, Texas did. We just killed him. Like, our airport killed him. Like, why do we want to remind everybody at every turn of this? But I guess it makes sense. Tourism dollars.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was actually going to get to this a little bit later, but I think it might be good to talk about now with regards to just Midwestern adolescence, Midwestern childhoods. I think one of the things that I related to is that there is a part of being from the Midwest that like if you stand out, that's not
Okay.
that's not okay.
Yeah.
Whether it's, seen as showy or whatever, or just weird. If you deviate from whatever the norm is, that puts you on the outside. And often it's like Midwestern nice. It's not always overt. It's not always bullying, but you still feel this distance between yourself and someone else or your family or like, and I think you expressed that really, really well. And I don't know that that's something that a lot of people understand about this place.
Yeah, and it was something that I would only learn about when I crossed that line. As a little kid, I was just kind of very playful and silly and liked to, very much like a theater kid, even though that my theater was passion plays, was very loud and dancey and flamboyant and effeminate and would often do something in a spirit of joy and then get that kind of pushback of like, settle down now, don't draw attention to yourself. Don't be unusual in any way. And I had a proclivity for being unusual, not because I wanted attention or to be rebellious, but something new was exciting for me. So doing something a different way, dressing a different way, finding ways to alter my speech or finding new words was very exciting for me. But the word I got most often in response was pretentious. Actually, I have a tattoo of the word pretentious on my chest here with a umlaut over the O, which serves no purpose other than to be a pretense. But yeah, like it was really hard for me finding any authenticity in that world where I just had to stay on guard so often to not violate these rules that were never clearly spelled out for me.
Right. Yeah. And that's surprising also, given that like you attended a lot of places that were probably better character or can be characterized as charismatic or Pentecostal, right? Mm-hmm. That was and you would think that a place like that would allow more emotive behavior.
Yeah. I talked to Sarah Kernokin about this. She's the one who directed Marjo, that great documentary about the con man evangelist in the 70s. And she had observed at the time when she was filming these people in this state of bizarre behavior, like an acid trip or an orgy or something, very primal, bizarre behavior. And she's like, well, these people are so reserved otherwise. It's interesting that they came to life in these moments. But her epiphany was that because they're so suffocated throughout their daily lives, that they work very hard jobs and there isn't a lot of room for expression, and there's a fear of drawing too much attention to yourself, of being seen as pretentious or silly, being ostracized. This is the one moment where you could set all of that at the door and really freak out, in a very satisfying way, really break free. And a lot of these people don't drink, they don't go to bars, they're not living wild, freewheeling lives. But up there at the altar, you can get pretty wild.
But you still found the borders. You still you touched against them because there is still just a degree of this is acceptable and this isn't. Yeah. But it's like a moving target, right? So you sort of have your head on a swivel all the time.
Yeah. And again, was never rebellious, was never like, I'm going to do what I want. Fuck you guys. It was like, yeah. Oh, that's the line that I just crossed? I didn't know that line was there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, which is hard for anyone, let alone a kid, to always be having to do that social calculus and just figure out what's happening. And I think that is probably the source of a lot of Midwestern anxiety. It's just where are those unspoken lines? And I think it is a distinct thing of at least white Midwesterners, from predominantly white places.
And you didn't want to speak too intelligently. I thought about this a lot recently in relation to Trump. you know, a lot of people will say, like, how can anyone walk away from those speeches and think this is a guy who should have his finger on the button? But his speech does have a kind of like everyman quality to it that I embodied the inverse of as a kid, where I really liked finding these $10 words and using them. But it would be kind of viewed as like, well, who do you think you are talking like that? Who do you think you are using that word? Or, just being too intelligent in general. Like, I had such a passion for like fun facts, like just filing things away, little details. I remember going to the Christian school and reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and it was a small class. The whole school had like 80 people in it, but we were reading it, and they read this passage that reminded me, like, oh, that's where Sixpence None the Richer gets their name. And I just blurted that out, and like people looked at me and it's like crickets. And then one kid's like, nobody cares, because I had this reputation for just bringing up these non sequiturs in the middle of class.
Well, you're just trying to share your knowledge. I get it.
Well, to me, I was like, well, isn't that interesting? And everyone's like, no, that's not interesting at all.
Yeah. So let's return back to the to some of the economic factors that like led to your parents getting together and what sort of built up what became your childhood. Your father, based on your telling, had a very difficult childhood of his own, and then he married your mother while she was also quite young. And then they were in a place that taught a lot of things that could be characterized as a prosperity gospel, even if it wasn't explicitly said that. Because, I don't think most prosperity gospel preachers say, I'm a prosperity gospel preacher. It's not.
Right. So, well, no creationists use the terms apologetics.
Right. These are the terms we use to talk about those things. Mm. But that was the environment in which they were receptive to those sorts of things. But then, were they aware of how intensely you were interpreting like all of the, like, just your entire childhood, as far as your religious environment and your home environment, how much you were soaking it all in and like internalizing it?
Yeah, I wonder that lately too. Like, if they knew what I was absorbing at the camps and conventions and Christian rock concerts, they had kind of cooled in their evangelical zealotry. They had 3 kids by the age of 21. And I think by the time they were 30, they were still Christians. They would still pray and read their Bible and, plan for heaven. But I don't think they were as on fire for God, to quote the phrase, as I was. I think I kind of surpassed them by the age of like 13, 14, and was very idealistic and a lot of finger wagging at other people, including my parents. But when I showed my dad the documentary Jesus Camp, which I do for a lot of people because I think it is like just such an excellent encapsulation of what it's like to grow up in that world, he's just shocked and horrified. And he's like, I can't believe I sent you to those places. But he was someone who was part of the Jesus movement, that believed Hal Lindsey's book, The Late Great Planet Earth, prophesied a lot of horrible things to come in the very near future. He was very much a zealot, but I don't know if he quite had a sense of how intense it was at those camps, how much crying, how much like hating yourself went on, how much shame for your sins was drilled into you for hours and hours at those camps, while you're just like dehydrating yourself with crying and trembling. And my mom, I don't know if she really had a sense of how often I was thinking about hell. The concept of eternity itself was enough to give me a panic attack, but eternal torture.
And you talk about it in your book, a demon that you named Caldonia, that became sort of this constant companion or tormentor. Talk about that, because that was, I've read your carnality novels, which in retrospect feels like a sort of an exorcism of a lot of those things of trying to get those things out. But I've not read an account like yours of the personification and the constant sort of, yeah, mental and emotional conflict between this presence in your life. Was that something that you shared with anyone?
It wasn't. And there's a lot of things in the book that I hadn't spoken about, maybe outside of therapy. And my dad asked me when he finished reading an early draft, he said, "Was that Caldonia stuff real?" And I had to say, like, well, I'm not making this shit up. Yeah. Because I'd written some novels, and, that were like loosely based on my childhood experiences. But I'm like, no, there's parameters of what, how flexible the truth is within this medium. So, yeah, it's all accurate. But, with those carnality novels, I could go into some like really wild Stephen King monster directions, like the manifestations of these things in real life in a novel that, never happened to me as a young person, but there was this voice in my head. And there was this kind of witch demon that visited me in my dreams often. And I also had like minor hallucinations of her, like crossing through a hallway in the dark, what is that over there? And, believing I saw something. And I believed in supernatural warfare, that angels and demons were around us at all times. Right. And there was all this Christian media where you'd see like a kind of blurring of those barriers, like you're suddenly aware of the demons around you and the hell houses we did. So it wasn't like that wild of a concept that I could be seeing or hearing a demon. And this character was very bullying. It was very shameful, and it would call out like hypocrisy in my mind. I was so idealistic, but I was so flawed at the same time. Nobody could live up to the standards that were imposed on us. But she was kind of the manifestation of all the rhetoric I'd been absorbing from attending like 9 different church events a week, all these camps, conventions, and plays and youth groups, and just lived in my mind all the time, like through school, home, my nightmares. I had so many nightmares about Caldonia. And I also really wanted a reader who didn't grow up in this world to, understand the visceral elements of it. Like I can describe the socioeconomic aspects, the political aspects, but like what it's like to be a terrified child absorbing this rhetoric, what it's like to live with that all day, every day. I wanted, with this book, I obviously wanted to validate a lot of people's stories, a lot of ex-evangelical stories, but I also really wanted to take readers who had no experience with this world on that journey and get them to feel what it was like.
Which it does very well, because I didn't have that personification, but I think so many of us can relate to that command to like take every thought captive that we tried so fucking hard to do, and then turn it into shame and turn it into these really like negative self-talks and the literary device of this voice speaking and interjecting throughout the book was very, very powerful, because that echoed my experience. And a way that I've tried to describe it before is that a lot of times, like if you take religion very seriously before you have a sense of self, the idea of like the Holy Spirit sometimes feels like an inner narc. It's like somebody that's just like trying to dog on
that still small voice.
Yes, but it's never. It's Scrooge in a Muppet Christmas Carol saying, "Speak comfort to me." It's like they never, not once.
No, like, you're doing a great job. Keep going.
Everybody makes mistakes, but no, like, and that unrelenting. But then at the same time, the thing that throws you and threw me as a reader is a bit of a spoiler, But you say when you address this person, like, it says, I'm doing this to keep you safe.
Yeah. That's what Caldonia says.
Yeah.
Which was,
so talk about that. And like, why is it that like all of this is actually this weird twisted protectiveness?
Yeah. I mean, that's really how trauma works.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like when your immune system starts attacking the body, like, well, it's supposed to be there to keep your body healthy, but at some point that energy can be turned around and suddenly your immune system is attacking you. That's the way trauma really works. Like, it's designed to help you when something is reminding you of that very bad experience you had. Part of your brain wants to be like, nope, don't do that. Like, don't go there. And I'm going to remind you of it again and again and again and again to keep you safe from that. But then at some point that becomes a hazard to your mental health, to your nervous system, to your ability to make decisions and navigate the world. So that was kind of how that conversation went between me and Caldonia as an adult, when I was realizing that this voice was trying to keep me safe. That's when you need to have a conversation with yourself, and, you know, like, you're not helping. Like, you're making things a lot worse. But then when you realize that about that voice in your head, you can acknowledge it and let it pass more gracefully and quickly in everyday life than reacting to it with a big flood of cortisol in your nervous system and be like, so you can just be like, yep, I hear you, I see you, don't need that protection. Move along.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Josiah Hesse. All right. In this next part, I want to actually talk a little bit about and try to tie it to the last few years. And obviously, in this moment in time, it's hard to not think about what's happening in Minneapolis and all these other things. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was this phrase that I had never heard before that you mentioned, which was chaos addiction. So I want to actually read a little bit and then try to tie it into what we're seeing now and hear your thoughts on that. But if you don't mind, I'd like to read a little bit.
Yeah.
You write, I no longer believe, but I still feel the fear, horrible and wonderful as it is. As a freelance journalist, I'm fueled by fear of poverty, of missed deadlines, of the dying out of my career or talent, and find it difficult to be productive without having a panic attack driving my ass into gear. I suffer from an overactive nervous system, ramped up when my trauma is triggered, which I then monetize into the form of wild sentences. My relationships, both personal and professional, are often mired in conflict. My therapist has wondered if I suffer from chaos addiction, whereby children reared on adrenaline will unconsciously pursue drama as adults, because it's the only relational dynamic they're equipped to navigate. Fear is quite possibly the most powerful tool for social control in human history. And that, like, just hit very hard, and it actually made me think about the things that sort of live in the background of our minds, even after we leave belief system, a community like evangelicalism. Like, there's years ago there were trending hashtags like rapture anxiety, for example, and this fear of the end of the world, but also an anticipation of it. And I'm curious what you, like, based on both your own upbringing as well as your work as a journalist and a writer, like, what we're seeing as far in the United States as this broader culture has evangelicalism sort of given everyone a chaos addiction.
Yeah, well, and like that passage says, it is very effective in social control. You're keeping people on their toes. I mean, there's a reason Trump is so great for news ratings. People are tuning in regularly to this crazy reality show in the White House. And admittedly, it is interesting. There is breaking news coming across my phone all the time that certainly gets my attention. But it is something that's not good for the body, not good for the markets, not good for society. What I've heard from a lot of economists is like, whether it's a free market, laissez-faire capitalism, or it's complete communism, government control, the real thing that the economy needs is consistency. We need to know what the rules are, what tomorrow is going to be, and plan accordingly. And Trump just loves, and it is effective, but he just loves to not really deliver a satisfying, comforting message to the public. And he said it before, like when he's asked questions about different things, he's like, I will keep you in suspense. And that's not what we need from leadership. I mean, you're a parent,
Right.
if there was something your kid is really frightened about, like, am I going to be okay? Like, is this medical intervention I'm about to do going to help? Am I going to be okay? And you're like, I'll keep you in suspense. Like, we don't know. It could be 50-50. It could be the worst thing that's happened to you. It could be the best thing that's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
But who knows? Tune in tomorrow. And I started seeing that a lot with people's finances in prosperity gospel. Because the thing about prosperity gospel, it doesn't advertise you're going to have some savings. You're going to be able to pay your bills at the end of the month. You're going to have some stability in your finances. No, it's like you're going to have a yacht. You're going to have a mansion. You're going to have the most expensive vacations. Your kids are going to have like the name brand clothes. You're going to send them to a university, like the biggest university. And what a lot of people needed was just balance and consistency in their finances. And I noticed this when I started living with middle upper class people in some of the co-ops in Denver. I grew up working class, and my family was consistently very poor. I grew up around poor people, but suddenly I was with people who grew up with means, very comfortable childhoods, and they had a kind of like ease with finances. We talk a lot about what was going on in the co-op with their finances, and for them it would just kind of be an easy, natural conversation, and they talked about it like a video game. And I don't mean this to disparage them, but for them, it was fun. And for me, it was anxiety provoking. Or when things were great, it was really great. And it's like, we're going to spend all the money now. We're going to buy a hot tub.
Right.
And that's, I think, what happens in that world when, everything is either the absolute best, you're on top of the world, or it's an absolute horror show. These churches don't really teach you any kind of like moderate balance with your emotions, with your finances, with your politics. It's always either like the highest or the lowest.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that sense of like being in suspense financially, spiritually, all of these things. Your book is very good at demonstrating that this was an economic issue, but also what was being told to my parents and myself at these churches did not lift me out of these places. It kept you there. But there is a turn in your story in that you do leave. You left the Midwest. You moved to Denver. You moved to San Francisco. Well, what was it about getting that physical distance from these narratives that dominate these places?
Well, it's a really cliched thing to talk about evangelicals as a cult, as a cult. But to use the cult analogy, there's a reason cult leaders don't want you to associate with people outside of this organization. What do they call them in Scientology? Like
I can't remember.
Negative Nancy's or something.
Yeah, they've got a whole... It's sort of childish.
Deniers. Yeah, something like that. And that's true in any high control environment. And there's a reason. It's very effective to do that. And you can keep people on board with increasingly bizarre messages if they're not receiving any kind of outside influence. And so for me, going to Denver, San Francisco, was meeting other people who just weren't pumped full of that rhetoric. And getting new information from them, but also seeing like these aren't bad people. When I was going to the Christian school in Forest City, very small town, very small school, very rural people, they'd show us videos of pride parades in San Francisco, and it was all just like glitter and confetti cannons and Donna Summer and like, big, wild, like Sodom and Gomorrah kind of hedonism, which was very attractive to me, admittedly.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But when I go out there and I'd be like, well, these are just people. They work their jobs, they raise their kids, they go on vacations, they try and do right by each other. These are not like the violent, immoral, greedy, suspicious people that I was taught to look out for. There's just a kind of universal aspect to humanity that was so different from what I was raised in. And I think that's often the antidote to this sort of extremism that people in any camp fall into, where you're blaming all of society's problems on an other. Is it the Jews? Is it the gays? Is it the immigrants? But when you spend a little time with these people and you look them in the eyes and you get to know them and their families and their lives, you're like, we're all just trying our best in this very goofy, strenuous charade we call life.
Yeah. Another thing that you that sort of is another thread that's weaved throughout the book is the influence of music, of art in general. And another point of relation is that sense of guilt of like exploring art from that's deemed secular, and wanting to, like my high school job, I worked at a Christian bookstore, and so I was definitely in that in my own way. And then like when I went to school, I went to a Christian college, and one of my suite mates would literally get a guilt trip one week and delete all the secular MP3s off of his hard drive. And then he would just then he would be like, fuck this. And then he would download all of the files from someone else's computer.
Yeah.
And it would just be this back and forth, just like a seesaw of like guilt and conviction. But at the same time, art is very liberatory. And so I'd love to just hear about the role that music and books and whatever other forms of art played that role in your life, both when you were still growing up and then once you left.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I love about the story of how rock and roll came to be was the dichotomy of the Black gospel churches on the one hand and the seedy blues joints on the other. It was portrayed in that Elvis movie that Baz Luhrmann made, where he's going back and forth between the really wild Pentecostal church and the place where people are getting down and having sex, and that really was like the kind of manic swing that I would go through a lot, and like you said, experience that kind of guilt of like, okay, no more of that. I'm only doing Christian music, because when you believe in supernatural warfare, you were taught, especially during the Satanic Panic years, this music has the power to infect your body with a demon who will control you. I mean, the narrative around Columbine was Marilyn Manson did this with his music. And years earlier, we had that with Ozzy Osbourne and, who is the other one? You got another thing coming, Judas Priest. A lot of accusations that like your music intentionally brainwashed our children into killing each other or themselves. And so it would, a lot was at stake beyond just your self-esteem. There was the shame element, but also it was like, well, I may become a murderer if I listen to this music. And I often say, like, Marilyn Manson didn't have any bigger fans than evangelicals, because no one bought into him I mean, we bought into him like 12-year-old boys buy into professional wrestling. Like, this is real. They are doing it. They are hurting each other. This is all anarchy. Like, the thing that just happened wasn't planned beforehand.
Yeah.
But to like most music fans, Marilyn Manson was just kind of goofy and theatrical, but like we were on board.
But
with
whenever
his
he does
message.
this thing in the Beautiful People video,
Yeah.
that was the devil. That
Yeah.
was, that was.
And I remember like looking at photos of him and being like so intrigued, but then being like, you can't, you got to look away. Or if somebody, I remember my brother, I had an older brother who was like 4 years older than me, and I idolized him and wanted to hang out with him and his friends. And I remember once getting a ride home from school with him, and they were listening to, I think it was Korn, and I just got out of the car abruptly and like had my ears covered with my hands, like, well, this is going to put a demon into my body. But then at the same time, like, I was so excited about music and movies, it just took up so much bandwidth in my mind that I would cross over into the secular world. And it was especially jarring when I'd realize how much of the Christian media I'd absorbing was really just a decaffeinated version of like I didn't know that like punk rock and ska weren't evangelical institutions until like 16, 17. I remember hearing like Green Day and Mustard Plug and be like, are these Christian bands? Like I thought only Christians sounded like this.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that now like metal is almost like CCM metal is like keeping that genre alive. Did you know that? Like some of the hard, like heavy metal or I don't know all the subgenres of that genre, but like that is probably the most profitable and the most sustained version of that music now.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, the Gothic aesthetic does come from medieval Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always said that satanic, I'm putting quotes around that, satanic music and movies are the most Christian music and movies because they are articulating that narrative of Satan and his power in the world. So, like, you can't really get more Christian than worshiping Satan, in my mind.
Yeah. That's very good. I like that. I want to end with some book related questions. You've written several books, and this is just a handful, just 5 sort of rapid fire questions.
Yeah, lightning round.
A lightning round here at the end. First one is: do you have a preference between print, ebooks, audiobooks, or are you sort of all of the above? What's your preference?
If I'm traveling, I got to admit an ebook is pretty nice when you got a lot of gear in your bag. But I reread it, I think, for the 5th time, the Stephen King novel.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was checking out from the library, I had to put a lot of extra effort into getting a hardcover because I wanted just a giant, like, King James level weight on my lap while I read that. And I didn't take that with me anywhere. I wanted to sit it on my couch and have this big tome in my lap. So it really differs. If I want to be like a pretentious hipster, I'll read like some kind of Kurt Vonnegut paperback at the bar, with the original vintage cover, not a reprint.
Nice. Yeah. I remember the first time you came into Chicago, I think you were reading a book about hell at a bar when we met up.
The history of hell.
Yeah. That was I was like, oh wow, that was like such an area of interest that was what you wanted to peruse at the bar.
Or maybe I just really wanted you to see me reading it.
Yeah. Either way, either one is valid. What is a book, second question, what is a book in your field that you think deserves more attention? And you can choose amongst your fields, because I know you write in other genres.
Okay, well, it's kind of a cheat because it's a friend of mine, but and of yours, B.K. O'Connor has this novel coming out in March called Eve, where she sort of rewrites Paradise Lost and the story of Eve. It follows the narrative through the first half of the book, but at one point Eve leaves her family, and the fruit of knowledge has given her like this sort of intellectual and physiological superpower for travel and investigation and curiosity. And she does a lot of interviews and writing, and also has these sexual adventures. And she has a relationship with Lucifer. It's just a wild ride of a book. It's bizarre that I could read a story, in the first half that I was very familiar with, and still just keep turning the pages like mad because it's so engaging.
Yeah, awesome. And what is a book that either gives you the most hope or makes you feel alive right now? You don't have to use the hope lens if you don't want to, but as far as something that just evokes something in you right now.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think I was going after that with rereading it. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people of a certain age return to their roots when you feel a little lost.
Oh, for sure.
In the 60s, late 60s, 70s, there was this trend of going back to the 50s. The Beatles' Get Back song was all about that. And glam rock had like so many allusions to the 50s. And that was when Happy Days was on TV. And I think a lot of the time when you feel lost, you just want something that reminds you of why you're happy to be alive. And Stephen King does that for me. But also High Fidelity. That was the book that made me want to be a writer. And I return to it quite often. And as I've grown up, the Rob character I relate to less and less because he was so emotionally immature. Yeah. And I'm a little older than his character was, but it's still something that I look, and I guess there's hope to be found in that of like, I remember being that guy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I've actually only know the movie. I haven't read the book, and it's Nick Hornsby, right?
Hornby.
And
an excellent series that should have been renewed. Zoe Kravitz played the lead role. I think she produced it as well. Mm-hmm. It's a Hulu series, and it's fantastic.
Is it really? I haven't checked that out either. But the adaptation is great. It is based here in Chicago, of the movie.
Yeah.
Anyways, fourth question turns towards advice to writers or academics or whomever getting started regardless of their age. What is something that you wish you knew earlier?
I don't know, because I think not knowing things was probably good for me at that age. And whenever young writers want advice from me about like, how do I get an agent? How do I get a publishing deal? How do I, reach out to these editors? I usually don't just find your space of playfulness and joy and enthusiasm and curiosity and protect that, from the outside world. I think that's something that I was doing as a kid, but I didn't know that was what I should be doing. I was very insecure about my writing. I wrote for 8 years and didn't show anybody anything, but I was cultivating a little playful space. I think this is also kind of a cliche, but when people are asked this question of would you tell yourself from 20, 30 years ago, everything's going to be all right. You're doing well. Keep going. This is going to work out. And stop worrying so much. But then again, maybe the worrying was what lit a fire under my ass. Because I do remember a moment when I didn't believe the rapture was going to happen and that hell was going to be my eternity, when I was like, oh, so I only get this little window of time here. It's going to disappear in the blink of an eye. And I might lose my creative enthusiasm as I get older, as a lot of people seem to have done. So I was like, you got to get to work. You got to write, and find this space of creation, of getting better and sharper and more fully realizing the vision that you have behind your eyes.
That's a very good, I love that response. And my final question is a magic wand type of question. And if you had a magic wand, how would you encourage more either literacy or reading in today's sort of media climate. And I'll pull back the veil a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about like the stats about, a significant number of Americans didn't read a single book in the last year.
More than half.
Yeah. And that maybe a third read at like a third grade level, of U.S. adults. So if you, as an author, as someone, as a reader as well, if you had that magic wand, what would you do to try to encourage more reading?
I saw this excellent interview with David Foster Wallace recently where he pointed out that he had a lot of friends who never read books and they were intelligent people. And what he attributed that to was the discomfort of sitting in a quiet room by yourself. And he was talking from 2001 or something. It was later on. I don't remember when he died, but it was in the 2000s, and obviously things have gotten so much worse today. And I include myself in this. I'm constantly absorbing podcasts, music, movies. Like I've got a screen on or earbuds in all day. I'm riding my bike through downtown Denver, and I'm still listening to the news on my headphones. And there is a moment when I try and sit down to meditate that my nervous system just doesn't want to sit in the quiet. It doesn't want to turn that energy inward and assess what's going on in my body and in my heart. And I think that is something that you need to be comfortable with in order to read a book. You don't have something new that's constantly refreshing and designed to grab your attention like social media does, or things that you can do at the same time. I can listen to audiobooks and cook dinner or clean the house, but sitting and reading, you can't really multitask with that. So I think getting comfortable with just sitting in a quiet room and being okay and getting through that first initial alarm bells of I don't like this silence that's surrounding me is what will open the doors to the magic of reading.
Right.
Because when you disappear into that book, the physical world around you just doesn't exist any longer.
Yeah, your mind starts building things and imagining things in a way that is really powerful. I love that answer. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Josiah. The book is On Fire for God. It's on sale now. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Blake. This has been fun.